what we've seen in the last 6, 7, 8 months is actual protests outside the banks and in the streets. And this is something that is, in China, that's a no-no.
Right.
You don't want the population getting angry and picking up sticks and clubs and whatever they can, because this is how revolutions get started.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Northpoint of View. I'm here with Dr. Walter Kimses. Walter, how are you?
I'm good. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great. A lot to go through today, but the Evergrande deal in China is back in the headlines. I think it's finally completely crashed to the ground now.
Mm-hmm.
They're picking up the pieces.
Right.
I heard something that their debt was trading at like 3 cents on the dollar, just about over. And there was an article in the journal yesterday where somebody asked, so does this mean that the crisis of real estate in China is over? Maybe it's just beginning, or certainly we're in the middle of it, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What big picture? How's China doing, right? What's their GDP? What's the actual GDP, not the reported GDP? What's going on over there? And then ultimately, what does that mean for us?
Yeah, so there's a number of dimensions, like you just mentioned. To me, the most important one is what's happened with Evergrande, because real estate's 25% of China's economy.
Right.
And it's not just Evergrande, who just blew up, but the number 2, and I forgot the name of it off the top of my head, the number 3, they've also all crashed and burned.
Right.
And then when you go down to the much smaller developers, it's a raging forest fire.
Right.
Right. People are trying to get their monies back from the bank because the deposits they made for the construction of apartments or houses, it's not happening.
Right.
And so these developers don't have the money, and they can't they can't proceed. And when you go to the bank to get your money, you can't get your money. And what we've seen in the last 6, 7, 8 months is actual protests outside the banks and in the streets. And this is something that is, in China, that's a no-no.
Right.
You don't want the population getting angry and picking up sticks and clubs and whatever they can, because this is how revolutions get started.
And a side question, is bankruptcy in China similar to bankruptcy filing in the U.S.? I don't know.
No, in almost the entire world, I would say it's much worse to go file bankruptcy in China or Europe or Brazil. The bankruptcy laws are terrible. In some cases, you can never again have a checking account. You have to go to the bank and get printed checks for you to pay bills if you need to pay that way. You're allowed to hold debit cards, but not credit cards. And so when you look at a business in China that stumbled, and they're trying to get back on their feet, they need access to credit, but you're not allowed to because you went bankrupt.
Right.
And so the culture of, failed once, you're done, compared to the United States, where you've been bankrupt before. Okay, how much do you need to borrow? Because you've learned. We look around the back, and so and see your scars. So no, this is the financial system in China is not geared to help the private sector get back up on its feet. And
so what, in terms of the drag going forward, what do you think? Well, currently, how's China doing, and sort of what's your 2 to 3 year forecast?
Well, China is struggling with the exports. China is going down the route Japan did, right? So 1987, Reagan imposed 100% tariffs on Chinese electronics and tools. Those companies moved their factories to other parts of the world, like Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, eventually China. And they would make the components in Japan, ship it over to these other countries without tariff, assemble the final product there, and those other countries would shift it to the U.S. with minimal tariff. And that's how the Japanese companies got away with it. So Japanese companies, they were okay. Japan economy just got slapped to the ground. They were already overvalued. You know, you look at the valuations of banks and real estate in Japan in 1989 relative to GDP or any other measure, it was astonishing. And so it was a bubble. We knew it was going to blow up. It did blow up, but it blew up in a terrible way in that Japanese companies were already exiting to other places. And when you look at the analogy to China today, you've got the financial sector blowing up. The real estate sector pricing was too high. And you got Chinese manufacturers moving operations to other parts of the world. You know, Thailand, Vietnam, you know, India, Indonesia, Mexico. You know, it's really, really tough for China at this point. I mean, the only thing that the Communist Party could do to completely change its stars would be to drop this, you know, state intervention in the economy stance, which is what they've been doing, and go back to be more of a free market economy, which is what they were 10 years ago. And that could help the economy thrive once more.
Doesn't seem like that's their attitude, though. If anything, it seems to be going the opposite.
Exactly. And you know, so unfortunately, the faster Z gets painted into a corner, the faster he uses his paintbrush. And so the exports are down. The internal consumption in China, consumption has not really driven the economy ever. In the US, it's 65 to 70% of GDP. And I forgot what it is exactly in China, but it's something like 25%. It's
wow.
A night and day difference. And so if you think you're going to prod consumers to spend more and that's going to help make the economy go, no. In fact, probably the more you do that, the more people want to hide their money because their savings accounts are subject to whatever the government does to the renminbi. And their other main source of savings, which is the housing, that's being torpedoed. The pricing is getting torpedoed. House price indices are down across China. The bubble isn't deflating, it's popping. And when bubbles pop, stuff goes all over the place.
And so would you say at this point that China is in recession?
I say so, yes. I look at the unemployment rate. It's way up, especially for the youth.
When you say way up, what do you think? What is that number?
To 35%. And that's being conservative. I've heard others say even higher. But the government isn't publishing it anymore.
And so if there's continued slowdown in China, next 2-3 years, where does that put our relationship with them? And obviously we got all kind of things going on with China, right? I mean,
yeah.
We got trade, we got military, we got, you know, our debt and, you know, how much of that they own, et cetera. So it's complicated.
It is, but you see, we maintained a relationship with Japan, even though the best part of Japan's manufacturing left, and so Japan lost that. But we maintained good relationship with Japan because they have China next door to them. With China and all of this exodus happening, the biggest fear that people have had, and this is for many years, is that they would adopt some kind of bellicose strategy where they, Taiwan or maybe not Taiwan, but that they would push for military aggression. And that's not a good thing. It's not good for China. It's not good for the Chinese people. I think it's a horrible mistake. But we are going in that direction.
I mean, that's what we saw with Russia, right? I mean, when a guy that's running the country feels the strains of the economic downturn to a point that he's got to make a move, then it's the kind of move that we don't like to see.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So what we have in the world is a big push by several countries: China, Russia, India, North Korea. I call it CRINC because it's just easier to say all the initials at once. But they keep talking about a new world order. And no, they don't appear capable of building a healthy economy in a new world order. Otherwise, I'd be all for it. You know, we've got some jackass politicians in our country.
That's a transition to our next podcast. Exactly. Walter, always great to be with you, man.
All right. Good seeing you, Mark.
Thanks.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, guys.